Maryland's farms grow more than food. They grow community, tradition, and a future worth protecting. But our farmers face rising costs, land loss, and policy threats every year. Maryland Farm Bureau fights back, securing tax relief, protecting farmland, and being a steadfast voice for our hardworking farmers. And anyone can join. You don't have to farm to stand with the people who do. Together, let's create Maryland's best farm future.
This is Old Line Farmer Radio, a Maryland Farm Bureau production, helping you achieve your best farm future.
Hello and welcome to the Old Line Farmer Radio. My name is Kara Hutchison, Regional Field Manager at Maryland Farm Bureau, and I am your host this week. It's currently June 26th, and the estimated average price of corn in the state of Maryland is $4.58 per bushel, and the average estimated price of soybeans is $10.11. Both prices are down from last week. Let's check out a couple of headlines. The Golden Owl Award is a national honor that recognizes outstanding agricultural educators, and this year it was brought to the state of Maryland. Maryland Farm Bureau is proud to bring the award to the state in partnership with Nationwide Insurance and the Maryland FFA. A big congratulations to Howard County's Kathy Wojcik, who was announced as this year's top honoree at the Maryland FFA convention. Thank you, Kathy, for your commitment to shaping the next generation of Maryland agriculturalists. Maryland Department of Agriculture Secretary Kevin Addix was recently named the president of the Southern Association of State Departments of Agriculture, also known as SASTA. This group is comprised of state agricultural officials and strives to improve American agriculture through the development and promotion of public policy. In this new role, Secretary Addix will bring SASTA's annual conference to Maryland in 2026. On Monday, Maryland's 6th Congressional District Congresswoman April McClain Delaney held a roundtable in Liberty Town on expanding rural broadband. As technology continues to advance in agriculture, reliable and affordable high-speed internet is essential for farmers using precision ag tools and accessing new markets. We thank the Congresswoman for her attention to this matter and including farmers in the discussion. This year's cover crop sign-up has officially begun and runs through July 17th. We speak with Hans Schmidt of MDA's Office of Resource Conservation on how this year's program differs from years past and how farmers can take advantage of this important program.
Old Line Farmer Radio, I am here with Mr. Hans Schmidt. He is the Assistant Secretary of the Maryland Department of Agriculture's Office of Resource Conservation, and he is here to talk today about the cover crop program, which by the time that you're listening, signups will be ready for that. And so we've spoke about the merit of the cover crops programs in the past. So maybe tell us just a little bit briefly about what you guys are doing day to day in your office.
Yeah, Jeb, it's crazy. I mean, we're going over a lot of different things. I think over the past decades, I think farmers have been hearing about water quality in the Chesapeake Bay and trying to meet our water quality goals. But it's really evolved to much more than that as you start to implement or start thinking about more on the climate change arena. More farmers are talking about soil health. Just trying to look at more avenues to making sure that farmers can be productive in these environmentally changing arenas and making sure that, they can produce a crop. So there's a whole gamut of different things that we are heavily involved with.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's very helpful to have folks that really understand agriculture in our state. And talked about this in the past, but there's a lot of people that just have this natural mistrust of government, and it's very helpful to have folks like yourself at MDA really are helping our farmers.
I appreciate that. I think back in the 90s when our family for 40, 50 years, we were primarily a livestock operation, and all the grain and the hay we fed to the hogs and to the beef cattle. And it was about that time when the focus was more on Chesapeake Bay and water quality and a lot of finger pointing at agriculture. And that's when you started seeing the Syria issues and more on the, regulatory nutrient management. And it was at that time when my brother and I were getting out of college, and it's like, well, we're going to get out of the livestock. We're going to focus more on intensive, irrigation and so forth. But then I find myself where I'm actually kind of in my role in senior management within the department, kind of overseeing some of those regulatory hurdles and so forth that farmers are having to face. And I think it's important that a farmer can have a seat at that level to help, understand that what is needed to meet some of our environmental directives and initiatives and so forth are practical for farmers to put on the ground. So trying to weigh that, trying to thread that needle.
Yeah, that's music to my ears. Really, kind of looking at our farming community as an asset in meeting some of our cleanup goals, as opposed to the problem. Kind of moving over to the cover crop program. Maybe if you can just tell us a little bit about the top line fiscal status of the cover crop program for this year, because I know that there are some changes. However, we are still operational.
Sure. Yeah. That was a concern during the legislative session. The funding for the cover crop program comes through two different funding sources. One is the Chesapeake Bay Restoration Fund, which is through statute that 40% of the septic fees goes towards the cover crop program, which comes out to about $11 million, $12 million every year. The other half comes through the Chesapeake Bay Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund. And there was a recommendation that had come out that those funds would be diverted to meet some general fund obligations. And in essence, we would basically lose half the funding for that program. We would be down to just that $11 million, which became problematic because in this past fiscal or in the fiscal year that we're in right now, the 2025, we've had a record-breaking year. We've had, we've got a $23 million budget, but we're going to spend close to $32 million on the program. And thankfully, we've had some carryover funds over the years that have kind of built up, and we will be able to pay that out. And we've had close to 500,000 acres that were planted into traditional cover crops. Kudos to the farmers who did that. This is 2025. Everybody's been hearing about trying to meet our WIP goals by 2025, and the farmers blew it out of the water as far as meeting our goals for cover crops. Cover crops is one of those big needle movers to meeting our water quality goals. It is the most cost-effective way of meeting our water quality goals. And when you're putting 50% or thereabouts of the available land into cover crops, and you look across the country, Maryland leads in the percent of cover crop acres. Kudos. I mean, farmers did a great job. Now, having said that, we're going into a fiscal year that we're a bit handcuffed a little bit with the fiscal constraints. We were fully funded for the cover crop. However, we spent all the carryover monies that we had in this year to pay out our obligations. So we're down to that 23 million. So we had to make some changes to the program so that we can stay recognizing the fiscal constraints that the state is in.
Yeah, and maybe if you can talk a little bit about what those changes are. I know the fiscal situation is very challenging, but so is farming, and we're still doing the same things that we were doing last year. So what's kind of the differences that farmers can see from this year to years past?
Yeah, I farm myself, and I certainly understand the challenges that farmers are going through. So some of the big changes that we made, first of all, we lowered the base rate. It went from $45 down to $35. And then what we wanted to do was really kind of simplify the program. We wanted to kind of make it so that farmers and consultants and the soil conservation district, everybody and staff really, it wasn't going to be too complicated. So again, the big thing was lowering that base rate to $35 an acre. The second big thing I would say is we took a look at what USDA's crop hardiness zones, they changed that a little bit over the last couple of years. We wanted to make sure that, we weren't sticking so much with the planting dates and so forth that have been in the past, but we wanted to adjust it. So we adjusted that. So in simplifying the program, we looked at some of these species like the legumes and the brassicas that may have had in the past had an earlier planting date of say December 1, or excuse me, October 1. Now we moved them to October 10th. The aerial seeding had an October 10th deadline. So October 10th seems to be a kind of a magic date right there that farmers can look and say, well, I know this is going to happen on this date, all these different things. So one of the things, and it came out of, we had put out some proposed changes out to the districts, and I know they had reached out to their boards of supervisors, and we got a number of feedback from the boards on some things that they liked and things that they didn't like. One of the things, one of the next changes that we made was um, for the dairy farmers who have manure and they need to get their manure applied in the fall so they can manage through storage through that winter period. Um, we wanted to make sure that they were also there was an option out there for them. So again, $25 for if you're applying, that non-stackable liquid manure to fields. If they're doing it, we'll pay them in the fall. They'll get their check in the fall. So I think those were probably some of the main things. I mean, we still have an incentive for rye and triticale, which are the rye particularly, but those species really give us the most bang for our buck when we look at the model and water quality and so forth. So we still allow for that, and we still allow for early seeding. By and large, the maximum farmers could get out of this program is $65 an acre, which is quite a step down from years past. But again, if you look across the country, there's not a better cover crop program out there, I think, than what Maryland has to offer. And we tried, again, trying to make something that was fair and across the board for everybody.
Yeah, we hear that all the time about how Maryland's really leading the charge with some of these sustainable ag practices. So it is encouraging that a lot of these things are continuing. So kind of to that, how can farmers take advantage of this program? Who should they be reaching out to? And moreover, even with these changes, why should farmers continue to be taking advantage of these great programs that you guys are doing?
So first of all, as I've said and we've said all the time, is go into your local soil conservation district. They are your front line. There is no state better in the country that provides conservation service, technical service to their farming community than Maryland. Maryland leads the charge. I served on the national board for a period of time, and talking to folks across the country, Maryland leads the charge. So I kudos to the districts. I would say get out to your districts, talk to your staff there, and they will go through the program and introduce you and tell you what your various different options are. I say for why should you do it? I think farmers should, this year, and again, we know that things are tight, things are tough in agriculture. You look at the commodity prices, and things are extremely tight, tough right now. I think one of the reasons farmers need to be kind of looking at this is they need to look at it through I'd say a different lens. And what I mean by that is this is not just a cost share program or incentive based program. They need to look at kind of more holistically at their farming operation, because there's many other advantages to cover crops than just a cost share program. For instance, they do help with soil health. They do help with absorbing nutrients and from releasing into the groundwater or to waterways. But one of the big things, and we had a webinar just the other day, and from Kurt Vollmer from the university talked about how farmers can manage cover crops for weed suppression. Farmers talk about, and we hear about, some of the weeds like Palmer amaranth and horseweed, a bear's tail, and some of these weeds that are probably a little harder to control. Farmers can use cover crops as a tool to help manage through that. I know from my personal experience on our farm, where we plant a cover crop, we have less issues with some of these tougher controlled weeds, as opposed to a field that we didn't plant a cover crop on, and we got to use probably some different tactics to manage those weeds, whether it's tillage or different chemistry and so forth. But cover crops can can help you manage through that. And I think if you can use that, plus you can get a little assistance to help through it, I think it becomes much more advantageous for the farmers. I've given many talks to farmers across the country about the cover crop program, and many of them look at it and say, "Wow, I wish we had a program like this." But our program here in Maryland has a lot of requirements that across the country they don't. I mean, planting dates, seeding rates, some of these things that other places don't. And yes, we do pay more. But I think, again, if farmers look at the program, it may not pay as much as it did in the past, but I think if they look at a bigger picture, I think they can see how the cover crop program can work to their advantage in their farming and their crop productions.
Yeah, very, very well said. And it kind of goes to just the merits of cover crops that obviously it's helping meet our Chesapeake Bay cleanup goals, but it's also great for soil health and other things that farmers really want on their operations. So to me, it's a
Yeah,
no-brainer.
Yeah, I think we've been talking so much about, trying to meet our Chesapeake Bay goals and we want to meet them by 2025. But I think, we now we're at the point where I think farmers really need to kind of think about other advantages to that, cover crops. And the state is willing to help pay for some of that to help them get that implemented on their farms.
Well, Mr. Hans, know you're very, very busy. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. And for anybody listening that, really wants to take advantage of these programs, please reach out to your local soil conservation districts, or even if you have questions, even reach out to the great folks at MDA because they are a great asset for our farmers in the state. So, Mr. Hans, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Heads up! We're off next week for the 4th of July holiday, but follow us on social media or visit our website at mda.maryland.gov to not miss a thing. With that, please give us a rating and review, and if you learned something new today, please share this podcast with a friend. Old Line Farmer Radio is a production of Maryland Farm Bureau. Produced by Jeb Burchick. Contributions this week from Kara Hutchison. Introduction by Hollis Zimmerman. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.